Welcome to Timeout 360. We are happy to be here. Please don't forget to like the channel, to share the video, and to subscribe. Today, we're going to talk about 5 cultural war issues that are affecting the educational system in the US. Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. History has shown us that to control the people in the country, to control its future, the government has to control the education system. We have seen in so many countries how the education is used to shape the belief of the people. For example, let's look at Cuba. Cuba, we have a communist system. And the education, that's how they change the mentality of the Cuban people. We have Venezuela, we have Iran, we have China. So these countries use the education system to have propaganda. But in some other countries, like the United States, the United Kingdom, England, somewhat Germany, these countries play a smaller role into education system. They don't have a heavy-handed system just like in the communist countries. But nevertheless, whomever is in control of this system, whomever is in control of the education system, has the ability to control the mind, to change the belief system of the nation, to shape the mind of the people of the entire nation. Let's look, for example, in Haiti. In Haiti, we have since 1864, we have les frères de l'instruction chrétienne. Maybe until recently, that has changed maybe recently. But we see the education system in Haiti have diverted the path of a historic achievement by the Haitian people by simply not talking about it, by simply not teaching it in school, by simply not informing our kids the values of our independence and the impact, the international impact of our independence on the entire world. By doing so, they not strengthen the national model of the country. L'union fait la force. L'union fait la force. But instead, you'll hear more often, which is most of the time encouraged, the saying, depuis na Guinée, nek te toujours a ineg. That's on the lips of almost every Haitian. But we don't hear often that we say, l'union fait la force. But we often say, depuis na Guinée, nek toujours a ineg. So this ideology of manipulating, controlling the education system is pervasive throughout the world. Let's take the invasion of a country like Georgia. Not the state of Georgia, by the way, in the United States. I'm not talking about the state of Georgia in the United States. I'm talking about the country of Georgia, okay, by the Russians. Let's take the colonization of Africa. Lots of countries in Africa were colonized by the British Empire. Let's look at more recently the occupation of Afghanistan. In the last 20 years, the US has occupied Afghanistan. And the main target of the occupation was to change the education system. Once you change the education system, you give the next generation a new set of belief, like democracy, like capitalism, like human rights, okay? So once you change that through the education system, you change the character of the country. Let's take the colonization of the Caribbean countries like Martinique, Guadeloupe, Haiti. They all seek the change of the education system in those countries. And by doing so, my friends, the future of those countries, the course of history of those countries, and the belief system of those countries have changed. Today, we're going to look at the US and we're going to look at the cultural wars that are ravaging the education system in the US. We're going to take the five most important ones. And to do so, we are with us our colleague, Roger Pierre, where we're going to dive deep. We're going to dive deep into the system and explain how those five those five cultural issues are affecting the education system in the US. Roger Pierre, welcome on Timeout.
Thank you, Jay. Good morning, and thank you for all the people that are actually connecting with us that are watching this show this morning. And I'm saying thank you to the internet, and it could be morning or it could be afternoon. It depends on where you live. Jay, I'm really happy that you invite me to exchange on that. But there is an issue that you point out earlier that I know we're not going to be talking about Haiti. But the French Institution Chrétienne, uh, this issue there, we know it's been there since 1864, as you mentioned. But the problem I'm having with what you said is where they weren't the only institution that were responsible for our education. I think I think back then we had an institution like the Department of Education in Haiti should have said something, should have done something. I don't think they were the one that take over the educational system. So I wanted to point that out. But I would share with you I understand where you're coming from when you talk about the U.S. when you're talking about the colonization of the occupation, the 20 years occupation of Afghanistan by the U.S. That I can go along with that, and I also when you're talking about the colonization, about the Martinique and the Guadeloupe, the other Caribbean countries, because we've seen that how they force their their education on the system on these countries. So,
Yeah,
but
they force their ideologies on these people.
well, I think we can discuss about that. But let's see the 5 points that we are that are interest to us to that are of interest to us today. So those 5 points, those we're talking about the culture war, and we're looking at those 5 points. Even though we are not going to develop all of them, but I think school choice, for example, is one of them. School choice, school prayer, okay. School education, sex education. Excuse me, sex education is a very big subject, and also textbook adoption, and also school charters. So these are the five, for me, the five main points that we need to go over this morning.
Mhm, mhm.
So,
But you know, Roger, it is impossible to separate politics from education. Okay, we have politics has infiltrated the education system for the longest. You can look in the 1960s where some books that were talking good about slavery, that was saying slavery was a good thing, slavery was a virtue, and all this kind of stuff. You can see in the 1960s we had to abolish those books in the in classrooms. We can look at in the past as well some hard button issues that were used in the past, like evolution versus Christianity. Or were human beings created by God, or did we evolve from monkeys? So the Darwins and the Christianity were fighting to take a place in the education system in the US. But now there's a vitriol right now. Well, there's a vitriol. It's like there's a hatred. If you believe in one set of system, it's like you are hated. People wants to kill you. People wants to murder you. That's this hatred is very bad for the system, and it's changing the way education is done in the US.
Well, this is a very sensitive issue because it's so common, it's so popular that we need to address that. And today, that's the reason why we are exchanging on the five culture wars. We talk about school choice, we talk about school prayer, okay, prayer in
Mhm.
school, and sex education, and also textbook adoption, and also charter school. Now,
Yeah.
why don't we look at another subject that I think it's very, very important? Let's look at, for example, the role of states and federal, and it was politics in education. Let's look at the role of states and federal. How does that affect what we are talking about? Okay. So how does the federal government, what the contribution of the federal government into the state as far as education is concerned, I'm sorry, as far as education is concerned. Now, we know, for example, in the state of Florida, okay, the local government, um, which is right now, I'm talking about the state government, it's a Republican state, it's a Republican government. And we can see it doesn't matter which government, whether it's Republican or Democrat that are running the state, they're pulling their money, the funding is always coming, has always been coming from sales tax, income tax, local tax revenues, and property tax. So when we are talking about earlier about the school choice, which we are talking right now about, we can see that the federal government here in the state of Florida, their contribution is less than 10%, okay, is less than 10% of what it is as far as funding. So we can disagree, we can agree to disagree, as the people say, but this is something that is extremely important that we need to go over. Okay, tell
Okay.
me. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I agree. When we're looking at federal, when looking at funding of schools in the US, the funding mostly come from the states. Okay. In the neighborhood, you see local taxes. That's what makes states being able to face the expenses that's supposed to go into a school. Uh, but federal government sometimes contribute 10, maybe 15% for the budget for the state, for the schools. And they support directly uh, some programs. So if the federal government is putting some money in the system, they are supporting special programs in the state. However, we have to differentiate the public school system for high school, middle school, elementary school, compared to the public school system for colleges and universities. So you see in the lower education bracket, you will see like things for kindergarten, where the federal government give money for no child left behind, this kind of programs to allow the school system in that state to have a better performance. So we understand the different type of funding that the school system is receiving.
Now, what is of interest to me is the local, the state itself, okay, what they are spending as far as education per child, okay, in that
Mhm.
state. For example, in the state of Florida, okay, let's look at the state of Florida. From K 12, okay, from
Mhm.
K 12, we're talking about $9,983.
Okay.
Okay? Now, for post secondary, okay, school spending, they're spending 23,000 per student,
Mhm.
23.8. It's almost $24,000. Now, if we look at the federal government, for example, as I mentioned earlier, they provide even 7.9% of that funding for K-12. So they in the post-secondary, they're doing, they're giving like 28,000, 28 to $29,000. So
Mhm.
these, earlier we talked about the way they want, we're saying politics into government and things like this. So we can see those state, when those states spend that kind of money, it
Mhm.
doesn't say it's for every district everywhere that's putting that money. So now we can see the influence the state will have on the local government, because the local government is pretty much depending on the state for that money.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because some local government do not have, okay, that kind of funding. They cannot buy themselves funding
Mhm.
education.
Mhm.
So the state had to come along and put some money. So by doing so, the governor, okay, the
Mhm.
government in place have a lot
Mhm.
to say about
Mhm.
the education. And that's what we're seeing in Florida. What do you think? Isn't that
But
what you see?
I mean, this is what it seems like. Whoever is giving the money try to direct the conversation in education. So the state is giving some money, so they want to direct the conversation. So the local government usually that's what's supposed to direct the conversation in classrooms. So in my neighborhood, I would like to have my local school district to direct the conversation. I don't want the state government to come along and tell me this is the book I should use in my classrooms. I cannot talk about sex education with the kids in my neighborhood. I don't want the state government to come along and tell me that. The same way I don't want the federal government to come and dictate to me what to teach in the classroom. And what's happening right now is that the state government is taking over the educational system, where they come in, they have laws, and they're forcing those laws on local districts, on local school districts. So the structure of the education system is very simple. You have the federal government who's providing some funding from some specific programs, maybe programs that are on in a minority neighborhood, underfunded populations. You have the state government who's supposed to oversee the education of the state in global, but the laws, the selection for books, what's being taught in the classroom, supposed to be decided by the local county school districts, by the cities, by the towns that are with people who are directly related to us. The school district on the board, it might be one of your friends. It might be one of the family members. It can be anybody that's in the neighborhood. That's what's important. That's in the neighborhood. So I really disagree with when I see the government, that the state government is infiltrating the local school systems and dictating what needs to be done.
Well, I think parents have a lot to say in that. But as we can see, we have example that is very touching. It's something very recently done in Virginia, for example,
Uh-huh.
where the governor in Virginia, Youngstown, I forget the last name, I cannot say the last name properly, but uh, he came out with critical race theory, okay, because of
Thank
the
you.
new switch,
Mhm.
the new switch. He switched that, okay.
Uh-huh.
He bring out that new things, critical race theory, whereby we're not supposed to be talking about the past things, especially when you're talking about slavery or what contribution, whatever the black has done. They don't want to talk about that. And
They
what
don't.
what no, they don't want. But what
Mhm.
happened?
Mhm.
He won.
He won. He
He
won. Yes.
focused he focused
Mhm.
on that and win
Mhm.
the election.
Mhm.
So what have we seen in Florida, in the state that we are
But
living?
before you go to Florida, hold on your thought. You see, young king in Virginia focus on the anger of the parents during the COVID lockdowns, because at that time the parents had a chance to to get involved with the teaching of the kids. And I think the anger was mostly directed at the government, because now the responsibility of teaching the students fell on the shoulders of the parents at home, who were obligated to do homeschooling or virtual schooling. So the parents really see that the teachers in the classroom are having a difficult time with their own kids, and that anger, I think, the governor used it in Virginia to win that election.
So, see, not to change the subject, the fact you mentioned COVID, this is so it's so amazing how COVID changed things, the framing, the thought
Mhm.
framing of people. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, because COVID has a big effect on that, and you just mentioned it. Okay, so what's happened now? We see it's being followed through by our boy here, by the
Mhm.
governor here, okay,
Mhm.
which came out and said, even classroom, they're talking about to take books out of the libraries. So for people, for our kids not to know anything about critical history, not to know about this story back then. So
Mhm.
the governor of Florida, for example, DeSantis,
Yes.
he's like he's campaigning on that. Okay.
That's what they're all doing. That's what they're all doing now. Mostly the Republican candidates. They are focusing on things that do not exist in the system, and they are creating an issue to make people angry. Recently, there was an interview that former President Bill Clinton gave, I think, recently, where he mentioned exactly where the Republican Party usually picks up a subject, a cultural war, and makes people angry about it, so that they can arouse their base and get them out to vote. But it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Doesn't matter if it's a lie. Doesn't matter if it's not true. But they just want to arouse the emotions and get people out there. And we have to watch out for those midterms, so that education does not become an issue the same way it became an issue in Virginia.
Well, we know that, and that's why we are talking about it. It's important to realize, for people to realize that eh, we have to get involved. When I'm saying we, I'm talking about the parents got to get involved if they want to put like a stop into it, because they do not. Some of us do not get involved. Okay, and it is important that we continue talking about this thing, because this is the basis that for the future of any country that's coming from the educational system. So
In
education.
Yeah, what
Mhm.
Roger, in our community, Roger, the parents are scared. The parents don't have time to go to the school board meetings. The parents sometimes think working is more important. They have to work. They have to put the time in so they can, get the paycheck. So the people who have time, or the people who are housewives, where the husband is a professional or the wife is a professional, one of them can stay home to take care of the kids, to look on the kids, what they're doing, and they have time to go to the school board meeting and raise hell. Because some of these parents go there, they're really raising hell in those local districts meetings. So, but the minority parents, the parents who go to work because they have to put food on the table, either because they are single mothers or single fathers, they might not have the same power and the same time available to go to the school district meetings. So we need to build a coalition where we can support those parents and represent them in those meetings, being able to bring them the subject straight to their home, straight to their ears. So they know they have to participate, as you say, in the education system. They have to get involved. That's very important. They have to get involved no matter what.
So that's why we're asking people to share that, to share this, to subscribe to that channel, because the channel is there for that. We are talking about issues that are important, extremely important to our community, and we want people to not only sharing it, but get involved. Get involved. That channel is there for, as we said, for education. We look at education, we look at culture, we look at politics, we look at everything that is important in our people's life, and they need to understand that. Now, Jay, I'd like to cover the subject, for example, the way the manipulation that we see into the involvement, like of politicians into the system.
This is very hardworking to me, Roger. This is very hardworking to me because I've seen the first time I've seen that in politics in the U.S. where national leaders, level of governorship, level of presidential candidates are getting involved and supporting local district school members. The
Well,
reason they're doing that is because they have an agenda they want to push. So they're supporting the people they want to take power in the local districts so they can push that national agenda.
well, you see, we mentioned that before. I think they were looking at the model that Young can use in Virginia. They see that they get result and good result because he won the election. But then they said, you know what? Let's go ahead and see. When I'm saying we know what, I'm talking about the party, the Republican Party using it now. Saying, you know what? Let's use that throughout the local district. And that's the reason why they get involved so much into the local government, the district, local district, where now the influence it's real. It's real because you've never seen that before, as you mentioned. But we understand why they're doing it because they have get result. Politicians use everything that they can get result. Okay, and that's why they call it science politics. Science. This is a science. It's political science. That's why they call it political science. It's a science. So these people, they don't do things like the guessing. They know exactly, they can measure it. They know exactly what they want to get as a result. Okay, and we see it in Virginia, and we see it's happening here, and it's going deeper and deeper. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's not going to change. They're going to use those wedge issues. They're going to use those cultural war issues to rouse up the base so they can get them out. So if you're looking at the five issues that we mentioned, one of them is school choice. What is school choice? School choice in Florida is it's not a big deal in school choice in Florida, but the way they're using school choice in Florida makes parents angry, makes the funding system, everybody's like they're fighting each other. School choice basically means a suite of state programs that allows families to use public resources to receive education outside of the neighborhood schools. What does that mean? If a special state program for autism, for kids who have autism, in your neighborhood school, your child who suffer autism might not be able to find like dedicated service or special attention at the public school where they are. So they might use the funds to go to a school outside of the district to take service. That's not supposed to be a divisive issue. But the divisive issue becomes necessary when people are looking at where the money is coming from. If it's if the school is funded by local taxpayers, which is tax on houses, if you have a tax coming on my house to fund the local school in my neighborhood, why should I take that money and then transfer it to another school which has a different tax base for my child to go to that different school? So if my child wants to go, he suffers autism, wants to go to a school, I live in Dade, my child wants to go to, I want to put my child in a school in Broward, why don't I use the funds in Broward to pay for my child? So that's where the funding issue comes, and that's where the culture wars is used instead of logic.
Well, unfortunately, it is what it is. As we say, it is what it is. Not and then it is hard because what am I saying? What I want to say about that is all these things can be resolved. It could be solved, okay, if the system was fair. They are trying to make it fair, but at the same time, they're getting pushback from people that are in the different district. For example, you just mentioned, if you are in a district in Dale, for example, and that education for the altruism for kids that have problems, it's not in the area. It's not in your local area. So they can change because of school choice. They can go someplace else, but they get pushback from these from their other district where they go and put their kids there. Sometimes they have difficulty of transportation. Sometimes they find a way to block that. So these are all loopholes that can be solved if they can put their heads together.
That's right. So why use it as a cultural war issue? Why politicize such an important issue? Such an important issue should not be politicized. It should be something like we look at it with genuine interest to solve the problem. We don't want to make it politics. We don't want to involve the governor. We don't want to involve the president. We don't want to involve senators who are in it just to arouse people, make people upset. Doesn't matter if I'm a Democrat, if I'm a Republican, if I am an independent, if I'm a libertarian. School education is there for everybody. School choice should be something that's available on a case by case basis because you don't want to drain the funds of a local public system and then send that money away to another district. So that's going to crush the minorities. The minorities are going to be crushed. In a wealthy neighborhood, there's enough money to spend on computer labs. There's enough money to spend on special programs. There's enough money to spend on after schools. There's special money to spend on almost everything because the tax base is higher. But on a poor neighborhood, the tax base is very weak. So why would you take money out of the public system in a poor neighborhood and send the child to a more wealthy neighborhood and you take that money and send it away? So we're supposed to be able to sit and analyze the problem and not making a political wedge or cultural war.
Well, unfortunately, as I said earlier, it's going to be, and it is a political wedge because that's what they are using, and politicians are using it to gain access, to get voice, to pretty much make people fight for them, fight over them, and it is an issue. I think it's
It's
once
sad.
you,
It's sad. It's sad. It's sad. But if you look at other issues as well, like school prayer, school
uh,
prayer, school prayer is so to me that's the most ridiculous wedge issue. That's the most ridiculous cultural issue that exists right now. School prayer. If it's a public school, why do you want to require a Buddhist, an Islamist, a Baptist, a Protestant to pray the same way a Christian do? Why would you want to do that? Because we have to separate the state from religion. We're not in a theocracy. We're not living in Iraq. We're not living in Iran. So we're not in a theocracy. People should have the liberty to pray wherever they want, wherever they want, but you cannot put in the public system where everybody's taxes is going there. So why school prayer is a wedge issue? I don't understand.
well, since 1962, my friend, this is Supreme Court decision since 1962 to take your school prayer out. So we are not going to get into this today because this is an issue that is big. Okay, so we can we can come back to it. But I just want you to know, it's not like that decision was made in 1962, and there are cases out there that is take take in consideration, especially school prayer. So, by the way, it's in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So we can discuss, we can jump, we can do whatever we want. This is like a Supreme Court decision. This is not, and there are some limitation, there are some exclusion too. We can talk about it. So,
But
not
you know, Roger, this is what I'm glad you say that this is a Supreme Court decision. But the thing is, we see what's happened with the Supreme Court when you put a bunch of right wing extremists, when you put a bunch of people that don't believe in the same principle as common people in America. The Supreme Court can come out with some extremely negative decisions. So they are humans, they're not perfect, they can make mistakes. And that's why the wedge issues that are being used in the school system is affecting the entire country, because these wedge issues, they're going to present it to a Supreme Court which is completely to the right, not even in the middle, completely to the right. And people are being victimized by those decisions. If you look at another issue that's important, that's causing heartache and headache, sex education in schools. Sex education, everybody's supposed to have a basic sex education. In Florida, maybe it's not required in Florida to have sex education. But you know, there are some parents who are afraid to talk about sex with their kids. So we can find a way, a common ground to teach sex education in schools. We can find a way. And it doesn't have to be a wedge issue. And all these topics, we're talking about them. We want to get into more details into those topics. And we will want to have, knowledgeable guests who can get into them, and we will really dissect it for you. But when we're looking at it, sex education, sex ed, is very controversial, because some parents are telling you, I have a religious belief, I don't want other people teach my kids sex besides me. But there are some parents as well who are scared to talk sex with their kids. So what do
see,
we do?
the Florida school, okay, are
Mm,
not required. I want you to know that. Florida school are not you. I want the audience to know that. Florida school are not required, okay, to teach sex education. However, they are
mhm,
required to teach comprehensive health education that includes instruction on teenage pregnancy. So they just don't want for someone, for an agenda, for any curriculum to talk only about sex. They do not want that. Okay, as I said, they want a comprehensive health education. Okay, they are more into includes in looking at that. Okay, teenage
mhm,
pregnancy, because that's a problem. So they want to go where it is like that's the end of the issue. In other words, teenage pregnancy. But if you don't go to education,
mhm,
separate education, as we said, sex education by itself, okay, when you get to teenage pregnancy, it's too late.
mhm.
It is too late. That you don't want that.
Yeah, but that's the issues. How do you talk about how do you address sex education in the classroom? What age should you start talking about sex in the classroom? What kind of sex education should you talk? So when you talk about gays, when you talk about lesbians, when you talk about the LGBT community, at what age should we talk about the LGBT community? At what age? At what age should we talk about sex pregnancy, as you said, where if you have your daughter, your son, who engage in intercourse and have a child, your daughter is pregnant. So how do you talk about abortion? When do you talk
Hmm.
about abortion? When do you talk about, responsibility of the father toward that child? When do you talk about responsibility of the mother toward that child? How do you compromise on services where you can support the child, and that young mother, that 15-year-old mother, that 17-year-old mother can continue with her own education, can have a college degree, can have a career. Being pregnant should not destroy the life of your daughter. How do you handle that? How do you start talking about that in the school system to prevent such disasters?
Well, in Florida, as I said, the curriculum is not to be comprehensive. It's not required to be comprehensive. The curriculum must include the benefits of abstinence. The curriculum must include the benefits of abstinence, as at the expected social standard. In other words, if a school choose to talk, to teach further things about like age, HIV/AIDS, instruction must emphasize the benefits of heterosexual, the marriage, the men
Men
with
and women. Uh-huh.
women and men, heterosexual men and women, stuff like that. So this is it's not something that you could. This issue is so deep. Okay, when we're talking about sex education, that need to be taken. We need to have a special edition on that alone and get some expert
I
with
mean,
us.
definitely I
You see
agree
what I'm
with
saying?
you.
Huh?
Definitely I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. We're going to have experts on these subjects, but
Yes.
when you look at the subject in itself, I'm trying to understand, why is it a wedge issue? Why do we make it a cultural war? Why do we have to fight to the death for such an issue where it needs to be logical, it needs to be comprehensive, it needs to be addressed in a methodological manner? Let's look at the issue of textbooks in classrooms. Some textbooks right now, you see governors, you see Republicans, they go in libraries, they encouraging the parents to sue school systems for what they're teaching in the classroom. If you talk about the "Don't Say Gay" bill, that's how the opponents in Florida call it. Uh,
Yeah.
if you talk about the "Don't Say Gay" bill, which allow a parent to sue the school system if that parent does not agree with what is being taught in the classroom. What about if I don't like what being taught? What about the PTA meetings? What about going to the school boards and argue your point? What about if the majority agrees? What about voting? What about if the majority agrees? Then we could go with the majority. What about that? Why does it have to be the group of people who scream the loudest? What it has to be the people who threaten more that get their way? Why is it like that?
You're touching a big point. There is one point that you're touching here. You're touching voting. Voting is a huge point because we know this is the only place, this only point that we can change, that can you can change the pretty much the course of what's going to happen. Is through
Mhm.
voting. So you mentioned that. Should people go out and vote? Everybody that that is against, because sometimes they don't even look at the agenda of these people that are wanted to win the office. And I wanted to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Watch, in that sense. Voting is great, but if in the school system they don't even encourage you to go vote, if in the school system the topics that you're supposed to know they hide it from you, if they don't want you to know about Rosa Parks in the school system, what are they going to teach you? What's going to motivate a young black person to go vote when they don't even know the history about Rosa Parks?
That's the reason why you went back to it again, and we need to. We keep going back to it. That's the CRT issue. Okay, that's because of CRT, critical history. So if they don't teach that, then quote unquote our black student, our black school, I mean, the kids will not know about it. So in voting,
Mhm.
they're trying to make it easier for them to
But,
align to what's going on.
But
Because
guess what?
Mhm.
But guess what? Guess what? CRT is not something that will be taught in kindergarten. It's not taught in elementary school, in middle school, or high school. Even colleges don't teach the CRT theory. We're not supposed to confuse history with CRT, and that's what most people are doing, and that's why we have the culture war. The fact that I'm talking about Rosa Parks, the fact that I'm talking about Martin Luther King, the fact that I'm talking about the consequences of slavery, the fact that I'm talking about what happened in Tulsa, that doesn't mean I'm talking about CRT. It's the culture. It's the American black experience. That's what we went through. We are supposed to talk about it to the kids, even in kindergarten, to tell them this is your history. So this is not CLT. This is our history. We're supposed to know about Toussaint Louverture. We're supposed to know about Jean-Jacques Dessalines. This is our history. Why are they preventing us to know about our history?
well, they can manipulate you easier if you don't know. That's the answer. That's my answer. You could be manipulated easier if you don't know about your history. You don't know where you stand. You don't know who you are. So therefore, manipulation is easier. They could manipulate you whenever they want, however they want. Okay, that's my position on that. Okay.
But
Anyway.
Roger, in the past, there were some books that were taken out of the shelves from classrooms.
Mhm.
Like I was saying, in the 1960s, when the movement of civil rights was at its peak with Martin Luther King, we saw that there were some books that were taught glorifying. They were glorifying slavery. We know that these books were pulled out of classrooms, and we understand. Me as a black person, I understand these books needs to be taken out. It's like you will have the Holocaust being glorified in classroom. You cannot glorify the Holocaust in classroom. That was a murderous, in a genocide event. You cannot glorify, the Holocaust. The same way you cannot talk good about slavery. There was nothing good about slavery. So some books have to be taken out. However, we see there was a balance between evolution and Christianity. They decided both of them needs to be taken out of the classroom. We think we can talk about Darwinism outside of the classroom. We can talk about Christianity outside of the classroom. We're not going to teach Darwinism in the classroom, but as science, we can mention the concept as science the same way in some religious classes or in some how would I call it, psychology classes. We can talk about Christianity, you can talk about Darwinism, but they have equal time. They have equal time for the student to be exposed to those topics. So again, these subjects, we need to approach them with intelligence, we need to approach them with sensitivity, we need to approach them with common sense. The fact that a party is using them as wedge issues, is using them as cultural wars to be able to win in an office, a political office, that is destroying the school system, that is destroying us as a people, and it's erasing our identity, and it preventing us from getting to the right side of history.
Well, my friend, we're coming to the end of our program because as I said, we will have specialists coming and get into these subjects because we need to clarify a few things. Okay. For today, we are going to say thank you to everybody that was watching, and we want them to to subscribe, to share, and uh, the word
Subscribe, share, like the page.
and
Let people know that these issues are important. And if you once you like it, you understand what we're saying. Stay with us, stick with us, because we will get into the details of this subject matters, and we want everybody to understand what's going on in our community, and you need to get involved. So, Roger, that was a pleasure for me to be with you today. We will end this podcast at this point. Have a nice day, and I hope we meet again with some guests who will get into the details of each of these subjects. Talk about school choice, talk about textbooks in classrooms, charter schools, talk about all these subjects because we want to know them, we want to be on top of it. Thank you. Have a nice day.